Before we begin, please hit that like button, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for being part of the story. This event took place about 10 years ago. I had always dreamed of visiting Thailand. As a man from Europe, Asian cultures fascinated me, especially Thailand, and I was determined to experience its rich culture, food, and landscapes. With this dream in mind, I took a Thai language course before my trip. I wanted to be able to communicate at least at a basic level when I arrived. After months of studying and saving money, I finally felt ready to embark on my long-awaited journey. When I arrived in Thailand, I was just like any other excited traveler. I explored as much as I could, visiting major tourist destinations, Chiang Mai, Phuket, Pattaya, and other well-known places. I wanted to see and experience everything the country had to offer. One day, while talking with locals, I kept hearing people mention a particular place called Samut Songkhram. At that time, this location wasn't yet a famous tourist attraction, especially among foreigners. I had never heard of it before, but after arriving in Thailand, I noticed that locals often asked if I had been there. My curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to check it out. Upon reaching the site, I spent the entire day exploring. The local market was buzzing, the architecture was unique, and the cultural atmosphere was rich and inviting. I wandered through the market, observed the traditional way of life, and took in the sights and sounds of this lesser-known part of Thailand. Time flew by, and before I knew it, the sun began to set. It was only then that I realized I had made a mistake. I hadn't arranged for a place to stay. Back then, there weren't as many accommodations available as there are today. There weren't many hotels or guest houses, but there were a few homestays available for travelers who didn't mind simple lodgings. After some searching, I found a place to stay, a traditional Thai wooden house on stilts. The ground floor of the house operated as a small coffee shop during the day, while the upper floor functioned as a guest house for travelers. It was a classic old-style Thai house built entirely of wood. The upper floor was an open space rather than separate rooms, with mosquito nets set up for sleeping. Being a backpacker, I had no issues with the modest sleeping arrangement. In fact, I found it charming. I wasn't the type to be scared of ghosts or the supernatural, so spending the night in a slightly eerie old wooden house didn't bother me at all. As the night deepened, the coffee shop downstairs closed for the day, and the owner of the house left, leaving me alone. The owner didn't live there, as the house was primarily intended for visitors. I climbed up to the second floor, where my sleeping area had been set up. It was simple, just a thin mattress laid on the wooden floor, with a mosquito net draped over it. However, as I settled in, something caught my eye. Near the head of the bed, there was a thick wooden pillar, wrapped in several pieces of colorful cloth. What struck me as even stranger was that right next to the pillar, there was a small tray with a bowl of rice, some side dishes, and a cup of water. Unfamiliar with Thai customs, I assumed the food was meant for a pet, maybe a cat the owner kept. I shrugged it off and lay down, preparing to sleep. As the hours passed, I drifted into a half-sleep state. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes even the smallest noise feel amplified. Then, I felt something, a presence. It was subtle at first, like a shift in the air, a change in the atmosphere, but then I became acutely aware that someone, or something, was standing right above my head. A wave of unease washed over me. Slowly, I opened my eyes, and there, standing just above me, was a woman. I was startled a bit. She was dressed in an elaborate traditional outfit, adorned with shimmering gemstones. She wore a tall, pointed headdress, the kind worn by classical Thai dancers. Her presence was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Then she began to dance. Her movements were graceful and hypnotic. Still groggy from sleep, I didn't immediately register fear. Instead, I thought it was some kind of local cultural performance, perhaps arranged for tourists like me. I continued to watch as she danced around the mosquito net. She moved in slow, fluid motions, circling me again and again. At first, I felt awkward just lying there, watching her, so I sat up to observe her more closely. Her movements were mesmerizing, and her face was breathtakingly beautiful. Her delicate features, her elegant form, everything about her seemed almost otherworldly. She danced in complete silence. No music played, and no sounds accompanied her every move. After completing 3 full circles around my mosquito net, she walked toward the foot of my bed. Then, she knelt down. With a serene expression, she pressed her palms together and bowed deeply. I watched in stunned silence. She slowly stood up, smiled gently at me, and turned away. She walked calmly toward the pillar, the very one wrapped in the colorful cloth, next to the tray of food and water. And then, right before my eyes, she stepped into the pillar. She didn't walk past it. She didn't turn a corner. She vanished right into the wooden pillar. I sat frozen. My mind raced. What had I just seen? For a moment, I was in shock, but from another angle, I wondered if I had imagined it. The pillar the woman vanished into was next to the top of the stairs leading down. She might have walked downstairs, but part of me was still confused because I could have sworn I saw her disappear into the pillar. But at the time, I didn't think about it any further and went to bed as usual that night. I woke up in the early hours of the morning when the owner of the house came to call me. Mornings in this local village followed the traditional way of life. People went about daily rituals like giving alms to the monks or taking leisurely strolls through the morning market. Hearing the call, I got up, went downstairs, and joined in the usual morning activities. I participated in giving alms to the monks, had a cup of coffee, and found something to eat for breakfast. That day, I remained in the area, fully immersing myself in the atmosphere of the place. I wandered through the market, taking pictures, admiring the unique sights, and enjoying the local surroundings. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, evening had arrived. I had originally planned to stay only one night, but as evening settled in and I reflected on the day, I found myself hesitant to leave just yet. The charm of the place and my curiosity about the strange events of the previous night led me to make a spontaneous decision. I would stay for another night. Despite what had happened the night before, I didn't ask the house owner any questions about the strange experience I had. I wasn't sure if what I had seen was real or if it was simply my imagination. Instead of seeking explanations, I pushed the thought aside and carried on as if nothing had happened. That night, I climbed the stairs to the second floor and settled into my bed, just like the night before. I wasn't particularly sleepy, so I lay there, flipping through the photos on my camera, reviewing the images I had captured throughout the day. But then, it happened again. The same eerie sound from the night before returned, a faint rustling, almost like fabric brushing the air. I immediately looked up, and there she was. The same woman stood at the head of my bed, in the same spot as the night before. She was gazing down at me, her presence both mesmerizing and unsettling. Then, without a word, she began to dance. I had already made up my mind earlier. Tonight, if this ghostly figure appeared again, I would capture her image with my camera. I needed proof. I needed to know whether this was real or just a trick of my mind. I gripped my camera tightly, adjusting the lens as I focused on her movements. Everything about the scene was identical to the previous night. The woman danced in the same graceful, hypnotic manner, her delicate gestures flowing seamlessly from one to the next. She moved above my head, her body swaying in elegant arcs, before she slowly circled around me 3 times. My heart raced. I kept clicking the shutter, determined to capture every moment. Finally, as she finished her dance, she knelt at the foot of my bed, just like before. I continued snapping pictures, my hands trembling as I documented every second of this bizarre encounter. The woman bowed her head in a gesture of respect, and then something horrifying happened. As she raised her upper body to get up, her head was gone. It remained on the floor while her bare, empty neck rose into view. Her head, severed cleanly from her shoulders, remained where it had fallen when she bowed. I was paralyzed with fear. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. For a moment, I couldn't move or think. Then, pure instinct took over. In blind panic, I threw my camera aside and bolted out of bed. I didn't even stop to grab my things. I dashed down the stairs as fast as my legs would carry me. I had no idea what was happening, whether this was an illusion or if I had truly witnessed something supernatural. Reaching the ground floor, I found that the coffee shop below had already closed for the night. The place was empty, no sign of the owner, no customers, no staff. It was eerily silent. Not wanting to stay another second, I sprinted out of the house and ran down the road. My mind raced, and I didn't know where I was headed. All I knew was that I had to get as far away from that house as possible. After running for what felt like ages, I spotted a small group of people sitting by a bridge, talking. Desperate, I rushed over to them, breathless, and began recounting my experience. I told them everything. The woman with the tall, jewel-encrusted headdress, the way she had danced, how she moved around me, and finally, the moment her head had fallen from her body. My voice trembled as I spoke, my mind still reeling from the horrifying scene I had just witnessed. The group listened, exchanging uneasy glances. Then, one of them spoke.
You've encountered a Nang Ram spirit.
Explaining that it was the spirit of a traditional dancer. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I had heard of Thai ghost stories before, but I never thought I'd experience something like this firsthand. The realization sent a chill through my entire body. Despite my fear, I forced myself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. I needed to think clearly. Taking deep breaths, I composed myself and started looking for a place to stay for the rest of the night, somewhere far away from that haunted house. The next morning, after a restless night of contemplation, I decided to return to the house to collect my belongings, and more importantly, I needed answers. When I arrived, I found the owner and immediately told him everything that had happened. To my surprise, he didn't seem shocked. Instead, he let out a deep sigh and admitted something unexpected. The reason he hadn't warned me earlier about the ghost was that he assumed that as a foreigner, I wouldn't have believed it. Since most Westerners are skeptical about the supernatural, he thought I wouldn't be afraid. Then, the owner revealed something truly chilling. Years ago, a young woman drowned near the house. Some locals witnessed her and believed her spirit had never truly left and still lingered there. People in the village whispered that a ghostly dancer resided on the second floor, which was why the owner had stopped letting guests stay there. But when the owner saw me looking for a place to stay, he assumed that, being European and non-Thai, I wouldn't be affected and wouldn't believe it anyway. So he made an exception and let me stay. Still shaken, I took out my camera. I needed to check if I had captured anything. I flipped through the photos I had taken the night before, searching for any trace of the ghostly woman, but what I saw made my blood run cold. There was nothing. Every photo showed only the mosquito net hanging in front of my bed. It was as if I'd been taking pictures through the net, and beyond it, nothing. No dancer, no ghostly figure, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Later, I remembered seeing a pillar wrapped in colorful cloth. I learned what it all meant. Those vibrant clothes were actually talismans. And as for the food and drink placed beside it, they weren't for the cat. They were offerings for the ghost. Even after a decade, it still gives me chills.